The mining colony of Kepri 47 had once echoed with the thunder of cargo freighters and refinery engines powerful enough to shake the surrounding mountains. Now, silence ruled almost every corridor. Empty warehouses stretched beneath cracked glass domes. Rust crawled across abandoned cranes, and faded warning holograms still blinked faithfully to workers who had disappeared decades ago. Only one workshop refused to surrender to time. Inside it, sparks danced through the air while a human mechanic lay halfway beneath the belly of a battered cargo rover whose manufacturer had gone bankrupt before he had even been born. "If you leak coolant one more time," he muttered, tightening another bolt, "I'm replacing your engine with a kitchen blender." The rover answered with an offended metallic hiss. "Threat acknowledged," a cheerful synthetic voice announced. The mechanic sighed. "I wasn't talking to you." "I know," replied the old maintenance robot standing nearby. "But emotional support increases repair efficiency by 4%. You've never increased anything except my electricity bill. I consider that a measurable achievement." The mechanic slid himself out from beneath the rover, wiping grease from his forehead with a rag that somehow became dirtier every time he used it. Around him, the workshop looked more like organized chaos than a place of business. Broken drone wings hung from the ceiling beside plasma welders. Shelves overflowed with mysterious machine parts whose original purpose had long been forgotten. A tiny cleaning robot repeatedly polished the same square meter of floor while ignoring every actual mess in the room. It proudly beeped. "Area clean. The rest of the building is falling apart." Outside a sign zone. He couldn't even argue with that. Living alone had made conversations with machines feel almost normal. Almost. He wandered toward the pantry tucked into the back of the workshop, already imagining the sandwich he had prepared that morning. The door slid open. He stared. The shelf was empty. Again. "You've got to be kidding." The maintenance robot rolled beside him. "Nutritional inventory has decreased." "I noticed." "Perhaps you consumed it." "I think I'd remember eating 6 sandwiches." Human memory is statistically unreliable. "I also lost 3 cans of soup." "You may have been unusually hungry." He slowly turned toward the robot. "Are you accusing me of sleep eating?" "I am merely presenting hypotheses." He pointed a greasy wrench. "You're at the top of my suspect list." The robot gasped with theatrical offense. "I lack both digestive organs and criminal intent." The second one sounds less convincing. Over the past 2 weeks, food had been disappearing almost every night. Not tools, not batteries, not valuable components, just food. Fresh bread vanished. Protein packs disappeared. Someone had even stolen half of a pie while politely leaving the plate behind. Whoever the thief was possessed strangely refined manners. At first, he blamed wild scavengers that sometimes slipped through damaged ventilation shafts. Then he blamed corrupted drones. One afternoon, he even blamed a particularly suspicious pigeon-sized maintenance bot. The tiny machine had looked guilty, mostly because one of its optical sensors blinked at unfortunate moments. Still, nothing explained why only edible supplies vanished. The mechanic scratched his chin. "This ends tonight." The robot tilted its head. "Will diplomacy be attempted? I built a motion detector. You built 6. I improved it. The previous version activated whenever you sneezed. This one only activates when something moves. Everything moves." He ignored that. By sunset, the workshop had transformed into a fortress of homemade security devices. Laser threads stretched across the pantry entrance. Micro cameras watched every corner. An old service drone dangled from the ceiling holding a cooking pot like an improvised alarm bell. The maintenance robot observed the setup with visible concern. "You appear to have declared war on groceries." "They started it." Night settled over Kepri 47. Outside, cold winds whispered through empty streets while distant orbital debris painted silent streaks across the stars visible through the fractured dome overhead. The mechanic switched off the workshop lights and pretended to sleep inside his cramped office. Hours crawled by. Nothing. No footsteps, no alarms. Only the faint hum of aging generators. His eyelids began to grow heavy. Then, a nearly inaudible click. One laser beam flickered. Another bent ever so slightly. Someone was inside. The mechanic quietly reached for the flashlight beside his chair, every muscle suddenly awake. A tiny shadow slipped across the pantry floor with astonishing speed. It was far too small to be an adult, far too careful to be an animal. The little figure gathered bread, dried fruit, nutrient packs, and a sealed container of soup with practiced hands, before carefully placing everything into a worn cloth bag. Then, just as silently as it had arrived, the shadow turned toward the broken ventilation tunnel. The mechanic stepped into the doorway. "You're really making this difficult." The tiny figure froze. The little figure remained perfectly still. For a brief second, the workshop became quieter than the abandoned colony outside. The mechanic expected the thief to bolt. Instead, two trembling hands clutched the cloth bag tighter. Slowly, the small figure turned around. She was a little girl. She looked almost human. Almost. Long, elegant ears emerged from beneath tangled silver hair, extending several inches beyond where human ears should have ended. Faint silver lines shimmered beneath the pale skin of her cheeks whenever the pantry light flickered, as though tiny stars drifted beneath her skin. Her oversized jacket had been patched together from old cargo fabric and insulation blankets, and her boots clearly belonged to someone 3 sizes larger. She couldn't have been older than 10. The mechanic blinked. "You're my sandwich thief?" The little girl didn't answer. She stared at the wrench hanging from his belt instead. Then she slowly raised both hands. The food bag slipped onto the floor. She whispered. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry." Silence settled between them. The mechanic had imagined dozens of possibilities over the last 2 weeks. Smugglers, scavengers, mutated wildlife, an unusually intelligent raccoon. A tiny alien child had never made the list. The maintenance robot quietly rolled into the pantry behind him. It scanned the girl. Subject appears undernourished. The girl immediately stepped backward. Her breathing became quicker. The mechanic noticed she wasn't watching him anymore. She was watching the exit, calculating, looking for the fastest escape. He slowly crouched to make himself appear less intimidating. "So," she flinched. "How many sandwiches did you steal?" She hesitated. 8. "I knew it." Then she quietly added, "And 3 soups." "I knew that too. 2 protein bars." "I suspected those." She lowered her head even further. "Half a pie." He sighed dramatically. "I spent an hour wondering if I'd eaten that myself." For the first time, something unexpected happened. The little girl looked confused. Then, despite herself, a tiny laugh escaped. It disappeared almost immediately, but he had heard it. "So," he continued gently, "you're not very good at being a criminal." "I don't want to be." "Then why steal?" Her fingers tightened around the worn cloth bag. "I had to." Everyone always said that. But something about the way she spoke sounded different, not defensive, desperate. He reached down and picked up the bag. Inside were exactly the things that vanished every night. Nothing extra. No valuables. Not even batteries, which could have been sold for a fortune. Just food. "You could have stolen tools." "I don't know how to sell tools." "Fair point. You have nicer food than the vending stations." "The vending stations have declared war on flavor." She looked at him uncertainly. "What's flavor?" He stared. "That might be the saddest question anyone has ever asked me." The maintenance robot suddenly raised one metallic finger. "I possess educational material regarding seasoning." "No." 17 hours. "Definitely no." The robot sounded disappointed. The mechanic looked back at the girl. "What's your name?" She hesitated long enough that he wondered if she'd answer. "Lira." "I'm guessing you don't live around here." She shook her head. "No." "Parents?" Lira froze. Her eyes drifted toward the pantry door, toward the darkness outside. She swallowed. "My mother." The words barely escaped her lips. "Is she with you?" A slow nod. "Is she waiting somewhere?" Another nod. "Does she know you're stealing?" This time, silence. That silence answered everything. The mechanic rubbed the back of his neck. He had lived alone for years. He had become good at reading machines. People were harder, children even more so. Yet one thing was painfully obvious. Lira wasn't stealing because she wanted to. She wasn't frightened of being arrested. She was frightened of returning without food. Suddenly, a loud metallic clang echoed from somewhere outside. Every color vanished from Lyra's face. She lunged for the bag. "I have to go!" She darted toward the broken ventilation shaft. The mechanic instinctively reached out. "Wait!" She slipped through the opening with astonishing speed, far faster than any child should have moved. By the time he reached the tunnel, she was already disappearing into the darkness beyond. Only faint footsteps echoed through the abandoned maintenance ducts. Then, nothing. The maintenance robot rolled beside him. "Recommendation." "I'm listening." "Consume remaining food before additional theft." He looked down the narrow tunnel. "No." "You intend to pursue the criminal?" "I don't think she's a criminal." "She admitted to multiple thefts." "I know." "Then your conclusion is statistically confusing." He remained silent for several moments. His gaze stayed fixed on the darkness where Lyra had vanished. 8 sandwiches, 3 soups, half a pie. Not once had anything valuable disappeared, only enough food for survival. He picked up one unopened nutrient pack from the shelf, then another, a bottle of purified water, a medical kit. The robot watched. "You are increasing potential losses." "Maybe." "You suspect additional thieves?" He quietly slung the supplies into an old field bag. "No." He switched on a compact flashlight and clipped it to his belt. "I suspect someone's waiting for a little girl who shouldn't have to come back empty-handed." Without another word, he stepped into the abandoned ventilation tunnel, following the faint trail of tiny footprints that disappeared into the sleeping ruins of Kepri 47. The ventilation tunnel narrowed until the mechanic had to crawl on his elbows, muttering complaints that echoed through the metal passage. "I repair engines for a living," he grumbled. "I did not agree to become canned food." His flashlight bounced across decades of dust, abandoned cables, and faded maintenance markings that pointed towards sections of the colony nobody had entered in years. Behind him came a familiar metallic whir. He stopped crawling. "Don't tell me." "I have joined the expedition," announced the maintenance robot. "How did you even fit in here?" "I am experiencing discomfort." "You don't say." My left wheel has become philosophical. "What?" "It is questioning why we continue." The mechanic sighed. "Go back." "I cannot." "Why?" "I am stuck." The mechanic closed his eyes for a long moment. "Of course you are." Several minutes later, after an undignified struggle involving lubricant, a crowbar, and the robot loudly insisting that this was not covered under warranty, they finally emerged from the tunnel into an enormous underground transit station. The station looked frozen in time. Ancient magnetic trains rested silently on broken rails. Advertising holograms flickered weakly, still trying to convince invisible passengers to purchase luxury vacations to planets that no longer existed. One smiling holographic announcer suddenly activated. "Congratulations, traveler. Delay estimated." The projection paused. 214,000 hours. The mechanic looked upward. "That's surprisingly honest." The hologram continued smiling. "Thank you for choosing Colonial Transit." "I didn't." "We value your feedback." "I haven't given any." "We have recorded your satisfaction." The maintenance robot nodded approvingly. "Efficient customer service." The mechanic laughed despite himself. Then he noticed something on the dusty floor. Tiny footprints. Fresh. Lyra had passed through only minutes earlier. He followed them carefully between abandoned platforms, noticing that the child avoided open spaces whenever possible. She knew this place well, far better than anyone should. The footprints eventually disappeared beneath a collapsed security gate. Beyond it stretched an older section of the colony. The air became colder. Emergency lights no longer worked. Strange crystalline plants glowed softly between cracks in the floor, bathing the corridor in pale blue light. The mechanic knelt beside one. "I've never seen these before." The robot scanned the crystal. Unknown biological classification. "So that's comforting. Probability of immediate explosion, 2%. You could have started with that." Fortunately, the crystals remained perfectly still. Further ahead, the mechanic caught movement. A small figure slipped around a corner. "Lira!" The little girl froze. For a brief second, she looked ready to run again. Instead, she stared at the medical bag hanging from his shoulder, then at the food. Confusion replaced fear. "Why are you here? You forgot these." He slowly held up the extra supplies. "I figured soup travels better with medicine." She looked genuinely bewildered. "You followed me." "I did. To yell at me? I haven't decided yet." She blinked. "You humans are confusing." "I've been told." She remained motionless. The mechanic noticed how exhausted she looked. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. Her clothes were damp from condensation inside the tunnels. Even standing seemed to require effort. "You haven't been sleeping." "I sleep." "When?" She counted silently. "Sometimes." "That's not an answer." "It is where I come from." He almost smiled. Almost. "Lira." She looked up. "Is your mother hurt?" The little girl hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. "Badly?" Another nod. "For how long?" "Many sons." He suspected she meant weeks, maybe longer. The maintenance robot quietly extended one mechanical arm. "I possess 73 first aid procedures." The little girl immediately hid behind a support pillar. The robot lowered its arm. "I continue to encounter social challenges." "It's your timing." "My timing is mathematically precise." "Exactly." Lira peeked around the pillar. "You brought a robot?" He insisted. "I volunteered." "You got stuck in a ventilation shaft." A temporary strategic pause. The little girl covered her mouth. A quiet giggle escaped before she could stop it. The robot recorded the sound. Positive emotional response detected. The mechanic noticed something changing. Each laugh seemed to erase a tiny piece of the fear covering her face. Not all of it. Just enough. She finally stepped closer, very carefully. "You aren't angry?" "I was." "You were?" "I lost half a pie." She lowered her head. "I'm sorry." "I know." Silence returned. This time it felt different. Not hostile, just uncertain. Finally, Lira whispered, "Mother said humans would never help us." "And what do you think?" She looked directly into his eyes for the first time. "I don't know anymore." Far away, somewhere deep beneath the colony, a low metallic rumble echoed through the tunnels. Not collapsing stone, not machinery, something else. The maintenance robot suddenly became still. Its optical sensors brightened. "Warning!" The mechanic's expression hardened. "What is it?" "I have detected activation." "Activation of what?" The robot turned toward the darkness ahead. Its cheerful voice became unusually quiet. "An ancient security unit has just come online." From somewhere beyond the glowing corridor came the heavy sound of metal footsteps. One, then another. Slow, deliberate, drawing closer. Lyra's face turned white. She grabbed the mechanic's sleeve with both hands. Barely louder than a breath, she whispered, "We have to reach my mother before it finds us." The metallic footsteps echoed through the tunnel with slow, unwavering precision. Clang, clang, clang. Each impact reverberated through the abandoned station until even the glowing crystals seemed to tremble. Lyra tightened her grip on the mechanic's sleeve. "It's awake." "You've seen it before?" She nodded quickly. "It patrols." "What exactly is it?" "It doesn't ask questions." "That's not encouraging." The maintenance robot rotated its head toward the approaching sound. "I have located the source." "Good." "I regret locating the source." "Even better." A cone of white light swept across the far end of the corridor. Something enormous stepped into view. The security machine stood nearly 3 meters tall, its armored frame scarred by centuries of neglect. One arm ended in a heavy industrial manipulator, the other in a rotating plasma cutter that sparked every few seconds. Its single optic glowed amber as it slowly scanned the passage. Its ancient speaker crackled. "Attention!" Static interrupted the announcement. "Authorized personnel." More static. "Probably." The mechanic blinked. Did it just say, "probably"? The robot processed the audio. Confidence level, low. The security machine continued. "Please present identification." The mechanic whispered, "Do you happen to have a 200-year-old employee badge?" Lira shook her head frantically. The maintenance robot proudly extended a small plastic card. "I possess a cafeteria loyalty membership." "Put that away. It contains 12 reward points." The security unit's optics suddenly brightened. Unauthorized whispering detected. The mechanic sighed. "It heard that?" "I am equipped with excellent hearing," the giant machine announced. "Wonderful. You are under moderate suspicion." "Moderate?" "Assessment updating." The optic flickered. "You are now under significant suspicion." The plasma cutter whined to life. "Run," Lira whispered. She didn't wait for agreement. The little girl darted down the corridor with astonishing speed. The mechanic grabbed the medical bag and sprinted after her. Behind them, the maintenance robot attempted to accelerate. Its wheels spun dramatically. It moved approximately half a meter. "I have achieved momentum." "You call this momentum?" "I prefer not to be judged during exercise." The security unit lumbered after them, surprisingly fast despite its massive size. Its speaker echoed through the tunnels. "Please stop fleeing." "No. Your cooperation is appreciated." "We're not cooperating." Negative response recorded. The chase burst into another transit corridor lined with abandoned maintenance vehicles. Lira slipped effortlessly between them. The mechanic squeezed through sideways, nearly dropping the food bag. The giant security machine simply walked straight ahead. Metal screamed as forgotten equipment crumpled beneath its weight. "I don't think obstacles are slowing it down." The maintenance robot glanced behind. "I have calculated a solution." "Does it involve surviving?" "Possibly." "I'd like higher confidence than possibly." The little robot suddenly turned toward a rusting cargo loader. With surprising determination, it extended a cable and connected itself to the old machine. Nothing happened. The mechanic kept running. "Now what?" "I am negotiating." "With what?" "The loader." "You can negotiate with machinery?" I asked politely. The cargo loader suddenly roared to life. Its engines coughed violently before one enormous mechanical arm swung across the corridor. The security machine walked directly into it. Clang! The giant robot stumbled backward, for exactly 3 seconds. Then it calmly pushed the loader aside as if moving an empty chair. The maintenance robot lowered its head. "My negotiation has ended unsuccessfully." I noticed. They raced through a shattered doorway into another section of the colony. Unlike the silent transit station, this area still possessed power. Ancient wall panels glowed faintly. Life support systems hummed somewhere behind reinforced walls. Lira finally slowed. "We're close." The mechanic looked around. "This place still has electricity." "Mother fixed some things." "Your mother repaired all this?" Lira nodded proudly. "She knows living machines." "Living machines?" Before she could answer, another booming voice echoed from behind them. "Please remain stationary." The security unit had reached the doorway. Its optic blinked several times. Then it paused. "Warning." The mechanic frowned. "What now?" The machine slowly turned its head toward a faded sign mounted above the corridor. Its speaker crackled. "Maintenance area." Several long seconds passed. Then it announced in an almost apologetic tone, "I am not authorized to enter without supervisor approval." Silence. The mechanic stared. "You're serious?" "Regulations remain in effect." "For over 2 centuries?" "Compliance is timeless." The maintenance robot nodded respectfully. "An admirable work ethic." The security machine remained completely still outside the doorway. "I shall await authorization." The mechanic cautiously took one step farther inside. Nothing happened. Another step. Still nothing. He looked back. "You could just ignore the rule." "I cannot." "Why?" "It would violate Section 12. "Who's going to report you?" The machine remained silent. Finally it answered. "I might." The mechanic couldn't help laughing. Even Lira giggled. The enormous security machine continued standing at the entrance with absolute seriousness, apparently prepared to wait forever. Lira gently tugged the mechanic's sleeve again. "This way." She led him through a narrow passage illuminated by soft blue lights. The air grew warmer. Somewhere ahead came the faint sound of flowing water. Then, hidden behind a heavy blast door covered in vines and old circuitry, a dim light flickered. Lyra's nervous smile returned for the first time. "We're home." She pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. Before entering, the mechanic glanced back one last time. The ancient security unit still stood outside the maintenance zone, perfectly motionless, patiently waiting for permission that would never come. The blast door closed behind them with a soft hiss, shutting out the echo of the ancient security machine. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The mechanic allowed his eyes to adjust to the dim light filling the chamber. It was nothing like the ruined corridors outside. Someone had transformed an abandoned maintenance sector into a quiet refuge. Portable power cells fed strings of soft lamps hanging from old pipes. Rain collectors dripped purified water into neatly arranged containers. Shelves built from broken cargo crates held carefully organized tools, medical supplies, and books whose pages had been repaired countless times. Nothing had been wasted. Nothing had been taken for granted. Everything inside reflected years of patience. Lira hurried ahead. "Mother." Her voice echoed through the shelter. "I came back." There was no answer. The little girl frowned. She rushed into the adjoining room. A heartbeat later, her frightened voice returned. "Mother?" The mechanic followed immediately. A woman lay resting on a narrow bed assembled from insulation panels and folded blankets. At first glance, she looked human. Then he noticed the long, graceful ears resting against her silver hair. Her features carried quiet elegance despite exhaustion. Pale silver markings spread across her neck and disappeared beneath the collar of her worn clothing, glowing faintly with every slow heartbeat. She was breathing. Barely. Lira dropped beside her. "I brought food." She gently lifted the cloth bag. "And soup." The woman's eyes slowly opened. Brilliant violet. Calm despite obvious pain. She looked first at her daughter, then at the unfamiliar human standing in the doorway. Every trace of warmth disappeared from her face. "Lira." Her voice was weak but steady. "Who is he?" The little girl hesitated. "He owns the food." Silence. The woman closed her eyes for a moment. "I told you never to lead anyone here." "I didn't." "You did." "He followed me." "I noticed." The mechanic awkwardly lifted the medical bag. "I also brought bandages." The woman's gaze settled on it. "I don't need your charity." "It isn't charity." "What is it?" He thought for a second. "A repair job." One eyebrow lifted slightly. "I'm a mechanic." "I can see that. I fix broken things. I'm not a machine." "No." He looked around the shelter. "But someone here repaired water systems, power lines, air filters, and half the electronics in this place." Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. "You noticed?" "I'd have to surrender my toolbox if I didn't." For the first time, the corner of her mouth almost moved. Almost. Lira quietly smiled. The mechanic stepped closer but stopped several meters away. "I won't come any closer unless you ask. You fear me." "No." "Then why stop?" "Because you're deciding whether I'm a threat." The woman studied him carefully. "You read people well." "I mostly read machines. They're simpler. They complain less." She looked toward the old generator humming in the corner. It sounds like yours complains constantly. It does. As if offended by the conversation, the generator suddenly coughed. The lights flickered. A shower of harmless sparks burst from one side. The mechanic instinctively turned. "Excuse me for a second." He crossed the room almost automatically, removed a screwdriver from his belt, tapped one loose panel twice, tightened a connector, and smacked the side of the generator with surprising confidence. The machine immediately settled into a smooth, quiet hum. He nodded. "There." Behind him came a soft voice. "You hit it." "I did. And that fixed it." Sometimes machines need encouragement. I've spent years studying bioelectric engineering. And I have no scientific explanation for what I just witnessed. The maintenance robot finally rolled through the doorway. "I possess one." Everyone looked at it. It was emotional maintenance. The mechanic sighed. "Please don't start." "I have already started." Lira giggled. Even the injured woman looked briefly confused. The robot approached the bed. "I have analyzed your condition. I don't remember requesting analysis. I provide complementary analysis." "How generous." "You are suffering from severe malnutrition, exhaustion, untreated injuries, and prolonged exposure to environmental toxins." The woman blinked. That was surprisingly accurate. "I also estimate you have skipped several meals." Lira quietly looked down. The mechanic opened the food bag and placed everything on a nearby table. "Let's solve at least one of those problems." The woman watched him carefully. "You expect repayment?" "No. Nothing is free." "I know. Then why?" He remained silent for several seconds. Finally, he answered honestly. "When I caught the thief." He glanced toward Lira. "I expected someone stealing because they wanted more." His eyes returned to the woman. "I wasn't expecting a child trying to keep her mother alive." The shelter became completely quiet. Outside, faint vibrations rolled through the old colony as distant machinery shifted somewhere deep underground. The woman slowly reached for Lyra's hand. "My name," she hesitated, "is Elyra." The mechanic nodded once. "I'm glad you're still alive, Elyra." Before she could answer, every light inside the shelter suddenly dimmed. The repaired generator emitted a low warning tone. The maintenance robot became unusually still. Its optical sensors focused on the ceiling. "I am detecting an external scan." The mechanic frowned. "From what?" "I do not know." A second warning followed. This time it came from one of the old monitoring screens near the entrance. Static filled the display. Then, for the first time in decades, a red message appeared across the cracked monitor. "Unidentified extraterrestrial biosignature detected. Transmission relay activated." Elyra's expression turned pale. She whispered only two words. "They found us." The warning continued, flashing across the cracked monitor. "Unidentified extraterrestrial biosignature detected. Transmission relay active." No one moved. The mechanic stared at the screen. "Please tell me that's an old error message." Elyra slowly shook her head. "It isn't." Lira looked from the monitor to her mother. "What does it mean?" Elyra gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "It means someone is listening." The maintenance robot rolled toward the terminal. "I shall disconnect the relay." The mechanic stepped aside. "You know how?" "I possess confidence." "That's not what I asked." The little robot inserted a cable into the ancient console. Its optical sensors flashed rapidly. Several seconds passed. Then it proudly announced, "I have entered the maintenance menu." The screen immediately displayed, "Access denied." The robot tried again. "Access denied." A third attempt. "Please stop guessing the password." The mechanic folded his arms. "I think the computer is mocking you. It demonstrates unnecessary confidence." It learned from you. The robot made one final attempt. The monitor suddenly emitted a loud alarm. 3 failed login attempts. Have a nice day. I believe, the robot admitted, the situation has deteriorated. You think? Elyra slowly pushed herself upright despite the pain. You should leave. The mechanic looked at her. I'm not leaving. You don't understand what this signal means. Then explain it. She hesitated. For several long moments, she simply watched the flickering warning. Finally, she spoke. My people were hunted. I guess that much. Not because we conquered worlds. Her voice became quieter. Because we refused to. The mechanic remained silent. Our civilization discovered living quantum networks long before most species left their home systems. We learned how to grow technology instead of manufacturing it. She touched one of the faint silver markings on her wrist. Our machines healed ecosystems. They repaired stars damaged by unstable mining. They restored dying planets. The mechanic frowned. That sounds like something everyone would want. They did. She met his eyes. They wanted to own it. Silence filled the shelter. Lira lowered her head. They destroyed our cities. Elyra nodded slowly. They believed that if the royal bloodline disappeared, the living networks would never awaken again. The mechanic glanced toward the monitor. So the biosignature belongs to me. And Lira? Elyra closed her eyes. She inherited it. The maintenance robot suddenly interrupted. I have calculated unfavorable odds. How unfavorable? If someone receives this signal, probability of visitors exceeds 94%. The mechanic sighed. I was hoping for something in the 20% range. I can recalculate. No thanks. The generator hummed steadily behind them. The mechanic's attention drifted toward the old equipment surrounding the shelter. Power converters, cooling units, ancient communication cables. Most of it had been repaired recently. He slowly turned back to Elyra. You fixed all this. I had time. You've been hiding here for years? She didn't answer directly. Long enough to memorize every sound this colony makes. He nodded thoughtfully. Then you know its systems better than anyone. I know the parts that still function. What about the parts that don't? She looked puzzled. They're broken. He smiled faintly. That's my specialty. Lira blinked. What are you thinking? The mechanic walked toward an old wall map of the colony. Dust covered most of it. He wiped away enough grime to reveal the underground maintenance sectors. The signal reached space because something relayed it. Elyra nodded. Yes. Relays need power. Yes. They also need hardware. She looked at the map. Understanding slowly appeared in her expression. You want to find the transmitter. I want to unplug it. The maintenance robot raised one mechanical finger. I approve of unplugging. You approve of everything involving cables. Cables are dependable. Lira stared at the map. But the relay could be anywhere. The mechanic shook his head. No. He pointed toward several abandoned communication towers. Most of those lost power decades ago. His finger moved lower. Except... Elyra quietly finished the sentence. The central maintenance hub. The one place still connected to the emergency orbital antenna. She nodded once. I thought those systems were permanently offline. They should be. The mechanic smiled. They've clearly never met old machinery. The maintenance robot nodded enthusiastically. Old machinery enjoys surprising people. A sudden metallic clang echoed somewhere outside the shelter. Then another. Lyra's face paled. The security machine. The robot listened carefully. It remains at the maintenance entrance. Then what's making that noise? Nobody answered. Another impact echoed through the corridors. This one louder, not footsteps. Something striking metal, again, again. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The mechanic quietly extinguished one of the portable lamps. The shelter grew darker. Everyone listened. A deep mechanical voice echoed faintly through the tunnel outside. Requesting entry. A pause followed. Then the familiar ancient security unit answered from somewhere beyond the blast door. Authorization denied. Another voice replied. Override authorization. The old machine answered immediately. Paperwork incomplete. The mechanic stared at the closed door. Did it just reject someone because of paperwork? The maintenance robot sounded almost proud. Procedural integrity remains exceptional. The second voice became colder. Stand aside. Negative. You are obsolete. I remain employed. There was a brief silence. Then the ancient security unit declared with absolute conviction, please return with the appropriate supervisor. A tremendous explosion shook the entire corridor. The blast door rattled violently. Chunks of concrete crashed from the ceiling. Lira instinctively wrapped both arms around her mother. The mechanic grabbed his toolbox. Elyra looked at him in disbelief. You're taking tools? He checked the charge on a plasma wrench. If something's breaking through that door, he looked toward the trembling entrance. I'd rather meet it carrying the right equipment than empty hands. The blast door groaned under another violent impact. Dust drifted through the shelter while warning lights flashed across every old console. The mechanic tightened his grip on the plasma wrench. Any ideas? The maintenance robot raised one finger. I possess 6. How many keep us alive? A brief pause. 1. I'll take it. Another explosion shook the corridor. Outside, the ancient security unit spoke through damaged speakers. Unauthorized demolition violates maintenance regulations. A different mechanical voice answered. Remove yourself. I decline. Heavy weapons fired. Metal screamed. The old guardian staggered but refused to move. Appeal denied. The mechanic couldn't help smiling. I like that robot. So do I, Lira whispered. Elyra slowly stood. Though still weak, her posture carried the quiet authority she had tried to hide. They came for me. They came for all of you, the mechanic corrected. She looked at him. You could still leave. He laughed softly. I chased a little girl because she stole my sandwiches. He lifted the plasma wrench. I think we're well past reasonable decisions. For the first time since they had met, Elyra smiled openly. It was tired, small, but real. The maintenance robot suddenly projected the colony map. I have discovered the relay. A blinking marker appeared beneath the central maintenance hub. Distance, 400 meters. The mechanic nodded. Can we reach it? Yes. Can they? They are attempting to. Then we're racing. Lira looked between the adults. I know a shortcut. Minutes later, they hurried through forgotten maintenance tunnels while distant explosions echoed behind them. The colony itself seemed to awaken. Emergency lights flickered on. Ancient ventilation systems roared back to life. Old machines, untouched for centuries, began humming as power flowed through buried cables. The mechanic looked around. I didn't do this. Elyra quietly touched one glowing wall. The colony is responding. To what? To us. The silver markings beneath her skin shimmered brighter. So did the faint patterns beneath Lira's. The walls answered with soft pulses of blue light. Living circuits spread through ancient metal like growing vines. The mechanic stared. I've repaired machines my whole life. He looked around in amazement. They've never repaired themselves. They're recognizing royal genetics, Elyra said. Ahead, the central maintenance hub came into view. Its enormous transmitter stretched upward through the colony toward the shattered orbital antenna. Above it floated 3 black armored drones, waiting. One turned toward them. Royal signature confirmed. Another added, target acquired. The mechanic sighed dramatically. I was hoping for less confirmation. The drones opened fire. He immediately slammed a control panel with the handle of his wrench. An old cargo crane, dormant for decades, lurched into motion. Its massive arm swung across the chamber. One drone disappeared beneath several tons of steel. The mechanic shrugged. Still works. The maintenance robot sounded impressed. Percussive engineering remains effective. I've been telling you that. The remaining drones advanced. Lira suddenly stepped forward. No. Everyone looked at her. The silver markings beneath her skin brightened. The living circuitry spreading through the room answered instantly. The floor itself shifted. Walls unfolded. Mechanical vines wrapped around the attacking drones before they could fire again. Within seconds, both machines hung harmlessly in the air. The mechanic blinked. I'm officially the least useful person here. Lira smiled. You brought soup. Good point. Elyra approached the towering relay. It cannot simply be destroyed. Why not? It will keep broadcasting until someone deactivates it through the living network. She placed one hand against the glowing structure, then paused. If I do this, she looked at Lira. Every royal gateway will close forever. Lira nodded without hesitation. I don't want a throne. I know. I just want a home. Tears filled Elyra's eyes. So do I. The living transmitter flooded the chamber with silver light. Countless symbols flowed across its surface before dissolving into thousands of tiny particles that drifted upward like glowing snow. Outside, every hostile signal vanished. The warning monitors throughout the colony went dark. Silence returned. After several long seconds, the maintenance robot checked the sensors. No active transmission. The mechanic exhaled. So, he looked around. We won. A familiar metallic voice echoed through the corridor. Situation resolved. The ancient security unit slowly entered the maintenance hub. Its armor was battered. One arm hung loosely by exposed cables, but it was still standing. It looked around carefully. Supervisor never arrived. The mechanic smiled. I noticed. I therefore handled the matter independently. I thought regulations. I completed the paperwork. The old machine proudly produced a bent metal clipboard. The mechanic laughed so hard he nearly dropped his wrench. Weeks passed. The abandoned workshop no longer felt abandoned. Laughter replaced silence. Lira filled every shelf with strange glowing plants that somehow improved the air filters. Elyra repaired systems no human engineer had understood for generations, sharing her knowledge freely instead of hiding it. The maintenance robot insisted on teaching everyone proper inventory management. Nobody listened. Even the old security unit occasionally visited. It always knocked. It always asked for authorization. It always received it. One quiet evening, the mechanic prepared dinner. He placed fresh bread, soup, and pie onto the table. Lira looked at the pie. I don't have to steal it anymore. He smiled. No. She looked around the room, at her mother, at the robots arguing over the correct way to polish spoons, at the workshop that no longer felt empty. Then she quietly said, "This tastes better when people know you're eating it together." The mechanic realized she was right. He had spent years repairing broken machines because they were easier than repairing loneliness. He had caught a thief expecting to recover stolen food. Instead, he had found a family. Outside, beneath the stars above Kepri 47, the forgotten colony was no longer forgotten. For the first time in many years, its light stayed on through the night.